Hi guys, these are going to be my photography tips. I don't want any arguments about them, so please don't comment with disagreements or things like we're in some sort of photography forum. I'm really not interested. These are my tips, they work for me, and people would definitely benefit from one or two or maybe all of these tips. It's not going to be everybody's flavour. There are so many people that spend their photography career in their bedroom in front of a computer and not actually out there doing it. So these are my tips. Whether I get thumbs down, comments, likes, subscribes, that's, it's all great. It's all part of the community. Don't want to create arguments. These are just tips, and if they're treated properly, some people can learn from them. I thought I'd add this disclaimer because I know what happens. I know what happens online with when people talk about photography. Anyway, I hope they help, even if just one or two help you. Anyway, cheers. Here they are. Hi guys, today I'm going to talk about photography. It's actually my job, so I thought, as I've never really mentioned it much, and as I take most of my photos just with my phone, I thought I'd talk about photography and the gear I use when I go out with one of my decent cameras. And so I thought I'd do a top 10 things. You might get a couple of bonus ones in there. And the first one on the list is number 1, wear good shoes. Now this came to me a few years back by a Magnum photographer, I believe, or a very experienced photographer at least. And essentially, wear good shoes. If you want to be a good photographer, you're going to have to walk a lot, because you're going to have to find the photos yourself. They don't just spring out, and occasionally you might get a good photo. Wear good shoes, get out there, do a lot of walking. Number 2, you don't need lots and lots of lenses. You can zoom with your feet, unless there's perhaps a lake or a sea in between, or a military zone or a minefield. There aren't that many reasons why you can't zoom with your feet. So if you have 2 lenses, perhaps wide angle and a telephoto, great. You can make do generally with those. If you can't zoom with your feet and there is a lake in between or minefield symbols, then adding them to your shot will actually probably make a better image. Number 3, always carry a spare battery. A battery in a camera can get cold and can show it's got less life left than it actually has. If you carry a spare battery, I always carry at least one. Good battery for a good Nikon DSLR. Keep it in your trouser pocket, so it's in your pocket, but it's against the warmth of your leg. It'll keep it nice and warm, and when the other battery in your camera does get low, or perhaps just too cold, just swap them out, and you might find you've still got some charge in the first battery if you need to come to it later. Always carry one just in case. My battery is good for well over 1,000 shots, but I would never risk just carrying one. And for things like flash guns and stuff, when I'm working on proper shoots, I carry lots and lots of spare batteries, and I wrap them in red elastic bands to show that the rechargeable batteries are full. Once I've used the battery and I chuck it in my camera bag quickly, I don't put an elastic band on it, so I know that one's empty and not ready to go. Number 4, don't fall for gas. GAS, gear acquisition syndrome. So many people think that they need to have better gear to become a better photographer. No, you don't. And people get in these little worlds of constantly wanting new gear. And if it's your hobby and stuff, great. But if you want to genuinely have good photos, stop worrying about the good gear you've got. Concentrate on the camera you've got and learn how to use it well. How to change settings without looking. How to be able to look through that camera, held to your face, with one eye at the viewfinder and one eye looking at the whole world, seeing what's going to come into your frame soon. That's gear acquisition syndrome. Can cost you thousands and thousands of pounds and will not necessarily make you a good photographer. Number 5, learn basic composition techniques. Learn rule of thirds. It's one of the most simple things going. It's basically a tic-tac-toe, not noughts and crosses grid. of 9 little cells, and where the 2 lines down intersect with the 2 lines across, you've got 4 points. If you can put your subject matter on one of those 4 points, your image will be more appealing. Not always, but in a lot of cases it will be more appealing. If you put a horizon exactly across the middle of your photo, it won't always look as good as if you put it 2/3 of the way up or 1/3 of the way up. If there's a tree in your image and you put it right in the middle, unless you're doing some arty symmetrical thing, and there's always breaks to these rules, put it to one edge, put it in one of those thirds there or there. Don't have it straight down the middle, because you create a tension in the image and the viewer doesn't know where to look, and it's psychologically not as pleasing. Again, there are reasons to break all these rules. Another one is leading lines, leading into your image. A nice winding road that leads to something interesting. A nice fence or stone wall if you're out walking that leads into something. Simple, such simple tricks. And there are lots and lots of others, but one just simple one I will say now is be careful of your crop. If you're taking a picture of some nice animals in a field, or interesting animals and cows and whatever, don't have one where just half its head's in the edge of the picture. Crop that out. Either reframe before you take the shot, crop it out afterwards. Doesn't really matter. Just because we use digital these days doesn't mean that when we used to work in the darkroom we didn't edit our images and expose our images and play around for hours and hours till we got the image how we wanted. But get the crop right. Half a person's face in the edge of a photo, or a person you don't want in your picture, it's not needed, and it can ruin a photo. And if you take a photo that looks good, just see if you can take it from a slightly different angle. But I won't go into too many composition tips. Just type in basic composition. That will be far more valuable than ever buying new expensive cameras. Okay, the best camera is, quite a lot of people have been attributed to saying this first, but the best camera is the one you've got with you. Now, on a lot of my walks, I take no more than my little Sony 3-year-old phone. It is adequate for what I'm doing when I'm walking. I use it for videos, I use it for mapping, I use it for everything. And as a camera, it's perfectly good enough. But if you want to take better photos, and I've got better cameras, yeah, take your good camera with you. They can be heavy, they can be bulky, and if you're camping, camera gear can add 50% of a lot of camera gear can add 50% of the weight of all your hiking and camping gear. So bear in mind, the best camera is the one you've got with you. If that's your phone or a small compact camera, fine. Stop walking around like an advert. This isn't really a tip, this is just my little thing. When people buy new cameras, they have the Canon or the Nikon or the Panasonic, Sony or Ricoh or Pentax or whatever camera make they've bought. They have the strap and the logo's proud and whatever. I hate it. I can't stand, because you're an advert not only for the company you bought the camera from, a free advert for them. You will also come up against the camera snobs. Or what camera you got? What camera you got? I have a plain black strap on my work cameras, and I even put little bits from time to time of black insulation tape over the model numbers and whatever. My cameras are actually now, we're in 2017, actually coming up to 7 years old. I work professionally, it's my only living. I work professionally using these cameras. They are more than adequate for doing a professional job. And I don't advertise what they are, but hey. The next tip is to quit online photography forums. They are a hive of trolls and hates and arguments, and I will say one thing. Just before, as I was quoting this list, I thought, what are they like? So I went on last night, I went on to searched in Google photography forums to see what it brought up, and I just chose one at random, and then I chose a group which just applied to the camera group I owned, and so I went into that specific thing, and I scrolled down the page, and there were about 20 5 subjects, and only 2 of those had any photos in them. Only 2 out of 25 had photos. You don't learn by reading what other people will say. You learn by doing, or by looking at other photographs and assessing and critiquing, even if it's only to yourself, other people's photographs, your own photographs. Go to galleries and stuff, far better. If you need to learn how to use your camera, RTFM, read the effing manual. It's as simple as that. You don't need to read it all to start with, because it always comes with a basics card these days, a few pages you need. And over time, read more and more. If you want to know specific questions, don't join a photography forum. Type it into Google. Google will give you the best answers, the best responses. You can scroll through and see which one applies. Spending your time and evenings going through these photography forums, don't get me wrong, I used to do it, but it can be soul destroying. You can get into arguments with complete strangers about rubbish topics to do with photography. All the time you're on them, you're not out there shooting. Okay, another tip, this is an important one. Never delete images directly from the camera. I never delete images. I always use quality, very high quality, expensive, fast SanDisk memory cards. I always make sure I'm buying them from a genuine supply source as well, and they're not counterfeit. The reason I never delete images on a camera is because you could accidentally delete the wrong one. You may find out later that it's not as bad as you thought, because you're only looking at on a less than a megapixel screen on the back of that camera. And there's always a risk you can corrupt that memory card. It's the only way I've known friends lose. The whole card has gone, do-do-do, please format card. And yes, you might be able to take it back home or whatever, but it can stop you shooting for the day. Don't do it. There's no need to do it. At the end of the day, look at all the photos you've taken and look and say, crikey, 10 o'clock this morning I was taking these images. And by 3 o'clock this afternoon, I've had my lunch and I've been shooting for hours. Look how much better these are. Look how I've improved for the day. Look at what you were doing wrong. Look at these images. Don't just delete them because you didn't like it at the time. They're your images. No one else has to see them. But learn from your images. Don't just delete them in camera. Mainly because it can corrupt. My camera takes 2 memory cards. A lot of the decent cameras do. If yours takes 2 memory cards, don't set them to overflow. Buy decent, large enough memory cards. They're cheap enough these days. Set them both to copy. So you've got 2 copies of your images. One corrupts, you've got another. I know some people that select video for one, photos for another. If you're doing a lot of video from your DSLR or your decent camera, fair enough, do it that way. Don't just set it to overflow, that's just a waste. This is a great backup facility so you don't lose images. Make the most of it. I often shoot raw images to one card, JPEG images to the other. Why? Because I'm working. When I get home, I don't want to spend too many hours searching through the images. If I upload those JPEGs into a software program, or onto my computer that is, into a program, I can zip through those JPEGs fast as anything. The RAWs might be a bit slower, my computer's not as up to date as some, and I know I can quickly find the image. The image will have virtually the same number. The first 3 letters, DSC, might have changed and the underscore might be slightly different, but then I can go and look for that raw image, pull that raw image out and really work on it. Sometimes the JPEGs are all you need. Sometimes you can use the JPEGs and you don't need to use Lightroom to process all your raw images, but it's nice to have both. So there's another tip. Okay, do you really need that filter? Lightroom, Photoshop. Lightroom I use to edit my images 95% of the time. 5% might make it into Photoshop. No, it's probably less than that. It's hard to say. But very rarely does an image make it to Photoshop. Now, Lightroom can do a lot of things that we used to do with filters, especially in black and white photography. Oh, it's amazing. But do you really need that filter on the front of your lens? Circular polarizing filter in summer when you've got sea or a lake or taking a picture of a car with a nice glossy bonnet, things like that, yes, have a circular polarizer. Obviously, if you've got too many lenses, you're going to need them, might need them in various sizes, but circular polarizer, yes. Basic UV filter, I don't think so. And people say it protects your lens. The only time I ever kept a UV filter on the front of my camera was when I had a really expensive camera and the lens was part of the camera, so it was worth £1,000 or whatever, and I thought the whole thing could be damaged, so I put a B and W filter on, a really high quality filter. But I don't do that anymore. One of my main lenses is worth well over £1,000. I do not put a filter on it. I use the lens hood. The lens hood actually protrudes 2 or 3 inches. That protects it. You really have to go to town to be able to poke that glass. And the way it's built is quite solid. The glass is thick and heavy. You feel those lenses. Yeah, you could donk them or a twig could hit them. Minor damage on the lens doesn't even show up in the photo. Minor damage to the sensor will ruin every photo. Photos, the cameras can't even focus as close as most big cameras with big lenses can't focus close enough to even show a minor nick or scratch on the front of a lens. Honestly, and the same with dust. It's not a major problem. Dust on the sensor, however, a different matter. So, do you really need that filter? If you want to, don't come moaning to me if you damage your camera. I dropped a Canon Mark D5 2 years ago with a 24-105 lens on it. Straight down, lens first, plastic round the edge snapped, cracked. It was my backup camera on the day. It fell straight out of my bag, stupidly. And so there's a tip, do your bag up. The plastic cracked, but I tested it, took photos with it. It was still absolutely fine. These, they weigh a lot and they're very well built, some of these lenses. And I was lucky, I must admit, I was lucky. But had I had a filter on that, especially some of these cheap ones, you buy a cheap one from China, what are you buying? You're buying a thin piece of glass that can basically shatter and put tons of scratches on the actual front element of the actual glass it's there to protect. You're actually introducing glass and shards of glass where it would just hit necessarily the floor or the mud or a tree or whatever. You're now introducing something that will shatter because they are rubbish and scratch your lens or damage your lens. Think about it. Okay. If you really want honest feedback on your photos, don't ask your mum. That's an old one. Mum always says, oh, that's a lovely photo. Oh, I like that. This is perhaps a tip for when you're moving on with your photography and really getting there. Ask your peers, share your photo, ask for honest critique, feedback. Not just, you never want anybody to say, yeah, I like it. You need to know why they like it. So, and it's good to share images. And there's some of the people in the walking community, bushcrafting community, camping community are sharing a lot of photos at the moment, and it's really good because they will really improve their stuff. And because some people know these tips or know 1 or 2 of these tips, and they will pass them on and they will take them on board and their photography will improve. I love photography. I kind of work part-time as a photographer, and part-time retired, if you want to say it that way, out walking and doing different things. I love my job. It was my hobby and it's now my job, and I think lots of people would like to do that. I'm not rich, I don't make a lot of money from it, but I make enough to enjoy my life and have a good work-life balance. Mentioned this earlier, use both eyes. One eye, whichever you use, to the viewfinder. The other eye, keep it open. Have a look what the shot is. Have a look what's approaching, what's coming into your frame. And perhaps you might want to close it once you take the image, focus, get your focus right with the eye at the viewfinder. But make use of that. If you see the old masters like Henri Cartier-Bresson, he would walk around with his Leica in his hand, looking at the image, and when he was ready, he would just focus and done, shot. He didn't even have to close one eye. Perhaps he was brilliant. He was so experienced. He got to know his camera well. Okay, another important tip if you want to catch the moment is to keep your camera in your hand or around your neck or over your shoulder. Don't have it in a bag, especially a decent bag which has got lots of zippers that make lots of noise, or Velcro which will send the wildlife you will want to photograph flying away into the distance. Even if you're doing street photography or interesting stuff, going into your bag represents an action that makes it distinctive, that you are getting your camera out for a reason, and you will come to someone's attention. If someone's close by and making an interesting composition, you go into your bag, they sense it. If the camera's in your hand, you're already there. They sense it, they move on with their thoughts, you can then capture images. But with wildlife and things like that, if your camera's tucked away behind Velcro or zippers, by the time you get it out, you'll have lost the shot anyway, even if they didn't hear the noise. Have it in your hand. If you're really going out specifically to catch shots, have it ready. Alright, this is my second to last tip. Forget the gimmicks. And for me, there have been, over the years, lots of gimmicks in photography. I've always shied away from them, and I've had clients say to me when I was shooting weddings, can you do that effect where you turn the photo black and white and leave all the flowers in their colour? And I used to think, oh my God, how tacky is that? But if they requested it, I would perhaps do it, but reluctantly. And I've talked, for the last few years, I've talked people out of it. It's a gimmick. You look back at them now and they look horrible. There's filters on your phone that can do that sort of thing, and everybody's bored of it already. Someone even managed to copyright or trademark or whatever a scene of Tower Bridge in London. They turned it to black and white and they left the red London bus as red. And they're now trying to sue people who are doing the same thing. What on earth? Oh, yeah, okay, it's a nice thing as a teenager to have on your wall for 6 months. It's a gimmick. Is it a real great photo? I don't think so. Hate it. Other gimmicks for me are, I do not like milky water. When I look at a lake or stream, I like to take a photograph of it as it is. Okay, you want to be arty and stuff like that? Great. Get a paintbrush out or something. But making a stream on a 5-minute exposure look like it's all soft and flowy. Oh, what a beautiful picture. Okay, great. As a one-off. It's a one-off gimmick. Are you going to go out and buy a couple of really expensive ND filters just to get that one shot? Ah, really? If that, one shot that's been done a million times and you're just copying, you're not being original here, are you? It's a gimmick, and yeah, it shows. It does teach you a few controls of your camera, and it will say that, oh, I'm actually pushing the boundaries of the camera. It can't really do it unless I put neutral density filters on the front and stop the amount of light coming in. So it has to take a really long exposure to be able to get that photo. That's the only way you can really do that. But for me, no. Try and avoid the gimmicks. They're just one-shot wonders, and all you're doing is copying someone else. And my last tip, not really a tip, some people will hate me for saying this, but leave the tripod at home. I use a tiny little tripod here for putting my camera on. Naturally, I need to, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to film this. It's a little handheld. It's like a selfie stick, but with a tripod at the bottom. But tripods for cameras? I don't know. Yeah, if you're trying to do gimmick photography, yeah, you're going to need it. But I just think they detract from it. Unless you buy a decent one, and I mean decent, at least 300 or 400 quid, they're not doing the job you really want them to do. And a decent tripod could be, especially a decent travel one, could be nearer £1,000 for some of the best tripods. Yeah, and then you need multiple heads, and then you need to learn how all the different ways it can work so that you can get down really low with that tripod or up really high with that tripod. I shoot from head level, and my body is my tripod. You tuck your arms into your belly. You hold it tight. You hold the lens in one hand. You're forming a human tripod. Trust me, modern cameras, anything in the last 10 years is capable of shooting well enough for you to hold like that. If it's not, then you're trying to use a telephoto lens or shoot way, way, way too far. The basic rule is, if you've got a 400mm lens, you need to be taking a photo at 1/400th of a second. If you've got a 100mm lens, 1/100th of a second. But that's for wildlife. If you're a wildlife photographer, yes, you'll need a tripod. Definitely need a tripod. But if you're just shooting randomly, which includes a bit of wildlife, with a average middle of the range lens or a do-it-all kit lens, there's nothing wrong with kit lenses, then you don't need a tripod. They're my photography tips. Thanks for watching. I called it a top 10. It's probably 15 or 16. Cheers, guys. Thanks for watching.